The lawyer's voice droned through my grandmother's grand living room, each word landing like a hammer on glass. I stood among my relatives, their expensive perfumes mixing with the scent of old money and fresh flowers from Alina's funeral 2 days prior. "And to my granddaughter Amara," the lawyer read, his tone carefully neutral, "I leave nothing. She has made her choices." The gasps around me were sharp and gleeful. My cousins exchanged satisfied glances while my aunt pressed a hand to her chest in mock sympathy. I felt my face burn, decades of love and connection reduced to a single cruel sentence. Alina's portrait watched from above the fireplace, her painted eyes as cold as they'd been in life these past 5 years. My husband Julian squeezed my hand, his palm warm and steady against my trembling fingers. I'd expected this, prepared for it even. But hearing my grandmother's rejection read aloud to a room full of people who'd always resented me still cut deeper than I'd anticipated. Alina's voice continued through the recording she'd made before her death, crackling with age and authority. "Amara married beneath us. Love doesn't pay bills or maintain legacies." Her final words to me, spoken from beyond the grave. "You made your bed, granddaughter. Now lie in it." My name is Amara Westbrook, though I was born Amara Ashford. For 28 years, that name meant something in our city. It opened doors, commanded respect, carried the weight of 4 generations of wealth and influence. I used to be Alina's pride, her favorite, the one she'd parade at charity galas and introduce to her influential friends. "This is Amara," she'd say, her hand proprietarily on my shoulder. "She'll carry our name forward when I'm gone." I believed her. More than that, I loved her. Alina had raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 7. She'd been stern but attentive, demanding but devoted. She taught me about art and culture, about maintaining dignity and carrying myself with the Ashford grace. We'd spend Sunday afternoons in her gallery, her voice soft as she explained the meaning behind each painting. "Art tells truth when people cannot," she'd say. Those were our best times before everything shattered. Before I met Julian and learned that love could be both everything and cost you everything. Before I discovered that Alina's affection came with conditions I couldn't meet. The day I introduced my fiancé to her was the day I lost my grandmother. Or perhaps the day she chose to lose me. The dinner happened 6 years ago, but I still remembered every excruciating detail. I'd brought Julian to Alina's estate on a Sunday evening, my stomach tight with nervous hope. He'd worn his best suit, the one he saved for parent-teacher conferences at the middle school where he taught history. Alina presided over the long mahogany table like a queen granting audience. The meal was formal, served by staff who moved silently between courses. Alina's questions began subtly, then sharpened into interrogation. "What do your parents do, Julian?" "My father's a mechanic, ma'am. My mother was a librarian before she retired." "I see, and your education?" "State University, full scholarship. I graduated with honors." Alina's lips pressed into a thin line. "Teaching, how? Noble, and what are your prospects for advancement?" Julian maintained his composure, but I saw his jaw tight. "I'm working on my master's degree in education. I hope to eventually lead curriculum development." "Curriculum development." Alina set down her fork with deliberate precision. "Amara, dear, you understand this man comes from a completely different world. His family is ordinary. Pleasant, I'm sure, but ordinary." "Grandmother," I started, but she continued. "You're throwing away generations of legacy for what? Romance? That fades, child. Money and position don't." She turned to Julian, her voice cutting. "If you marry her, you'll be cutting her off from everything she's known." We married 6 months later in a small ceremony at the courthouse, followed by a reception at a community center that Julian's parents helped us afford. The venue was modest but filled with warmth from his family, my few friends who'd remained loyal, and the love between us that Alina insisted would fade. I'd sent invitations to my entire family. Every single one was returned unopened, except for my grandmother's. She sent a single white envelope. No card, no message. Just a check for $10,000 torn precisely in half, the pieces arranged like a statement. "This is what your choice is worth." Julian found me crying in the bathroom before the ceremony, the torn check clutched in my hands. "We can still call it off," he said gently, though I heard the pain underneath. "We can wait, try to make peace with them first." I looked at him, at this man who loved me enough to offer to walk away, and made my choice again. "If love costs me everything," I whispered, wiping my eyes, "then so be it." The ceremony was beautiful despite the empty pews where my family should have sat. Julian's mother cried happy tears. His father made a toast about love being the only inheritance that mattered. But I couldn't stop glancing at those empty spaces, at the absence that spoke louder than any presence could have. The Whisper campaign began almost immediately. My cousins, Vanessa and Marcus, made sure everyone in our social circle knew about my rebellious marriage. At a charity event I attended with Julian 3 months after our wedding, I overheard my aunt speaking to a group of society women. "Poor Alina," she sighed dramatically. "Amara only married that teacher to rebel. She'll come crawling back when she's broke and realizes what she's given up." I stood frozen behind a column, Julian beside me, both of us hearing every word. "The girl had everything," another woman added. "Position, wealth, opportunity, and she threw it away for what? A man who makes $40,000 a year." They laughed, the sound brittle and cruel. Julian's hand found mine, his grip tight. "We should leave," he whispered, but I couldn't move. Couldn't stop listening to my life being dissected and dismissed by people who'd smiled to my face weeks earlier. Alina's heartbroken, of course, but she's right to cut Amara off. You can't reward that kind of foolishness. We left quietly, avoiding the main rooms. In the car, I made myself a promise. I would never crawl back to them, never prove them right about my supposed regret. If I'd chosen love over legacy, I'd build a new legacy from that love, one they couldn't inherit or understand. 2 weeks later, I received an unexpected call. Alina had fallen ill. Despite everything, she was still my grandmother, and I couldn't not go to her. I rushed to Alina's estate the next morning, a bouquet of white lilies in my hands, her favorite flowers. My heart hammered with hope that her illness had softened her, that facing mortality might remind her that I was still her granddaughter, still the girl who'd sat beside her in the gallery learning about art and beauty. The housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, met me at the door. Her face was apologetic but firm. "I'm sorry, Miss Amara. Mrs. Ashford doesn't wish to see you." I looked past her into the foyer I'd known my entire life. "Please, I just want to make sure she's okay. I won't stay long." She was very clear in her instructions. Mrs. Chen's voice dropped. "I'm sorry." Movement caught my eye. Through the large bay window overlooking the front drive, I saw Alina. She stood in her sitting room, watching. Our eyes met across the distance. I raised my hand in a small wave, a gesture of peace and love. She turned away, her back rigid, her dismissal absolute. I stood on that doorstep holding flowers that would never be received, feeling like that 7-year-old orphan again. Alone and unwanted. Julian found me sitting in the car an hour later, still parked in the circular drive, the flowers wilting beside me. "She wouldn't see me," I whispered. "After everything, she wouldn't even see me." He held me while I cried, then gently started the car. "That's still my family," I said as we drove away. "I know," he replied quietly, "but they stopped being yours." The years that followed became a montage of rejection. Every holiday I sent cards. Every single one came back unopened, marked return to sender in the same handwriting that used to address my birthday cards. Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter, Alina's birthday, each occasion marked by my hopeful reach and the family's consistent silence. I left voicemails that were never returned. "Hi, grandmother, it's Amara. I hope you're well. I miss you. Please call me back." "Happy birthday, grandmother. I'm thinking of you today. It's Christmas. I wanted to hear your voice." The loneliness ate at me in ways I couldn't explain to Julian, though he tried to understand. He'd grown up with family dinners and unconditional acceptance. My loss was foreign to him, this specific pain of being excised from your bloodline while still breathing. "One day," he promised, holding me through another holiday where the phone didn't ring. "They'll regret it. They'll realize what they lost when they pushed you away." I wanted to believe him, but as 3 years turned to 4, I began to accept that some doors, once closed, stayed locked forever. Then, unexpectedly, a door opened. I received a job offer from the Riverside Art Center, teaching children's painting classes. It was humble compared to my former life, but it was mine. My first step toward building something that wasn't defined by the Ashford name or Alina's approval. My first glimpse of my own light. Teaching children to paint became my salvation. The art center was modest, housed in a converted warehouse with high ceilings and natural light streaming through tall windows. My students ranged from 6 to 16, their talents varied but their enthusiasm pure. They called me Miss A, and for 3 hours every afternoon I forgot about inheritance and family rejection. "Paint what you feel," I'd tell them. "Don't worry about making it perfect." Just make it true. Watching them discover their own artistic voices healed something in me. Their joy was uncomplicated, their creativity unhindered by expectation or tradition. One autumn day, I attended a local charity auction at a gallery I'd never visited. The event supported youth art programs, so I went to show solidarity with my students. That's where I saw it. Aliner's portrait hung prominently in the main gallery, donated by Vanessa for the auction. My grandmother's painted eyes stared out with the same imperial gaze I remembered, the same slight disappointment that had defined our last years together. A woman beside me noticed my starring. "Beautiful work, isn't it? The Ashford family donated it." "It's stunning," I managed. A reporter with a camera approached us. "Excuse me, are you the artist?" He was looking at me. "No, she looks just like the subject. Are you family?" An idea formed, sudden and unbidden. Maybe I couldn't reach Aliner, but maybe I could speak to her through the one language we'd both understood. Art. That night, I pulled out supplies I hadn't touched in years. Canvas, paints, brushes that still smelled of turpentine and memory. I painted until dawn, my hands moving with muscle memory Aliner had helped cultivate during those Sunday afternoons. The piece that emerged was raw and honest. A shadowy figure standing in an empty mansion, surrounded by possessions but utterly alone. I called it Inheritance. I showed it to Julian over breakfast, exhausted but strangely lighter. "It's powerful," he said quietly, "and painful. Both, like everything about family." I took it to a small gallery in the Arts District, a place that featured local artists. The owner, a woman named Petra, studied it for a long moment. "There's real emotion here, truth. People respond to truth." She hung it that week. It sold within 3 days. I stared at the notification on my phone, shocked that someone had paid $300 for my pain translated to canvas. The buyer was listed as anonymous. That evening, Julian confessed over dinner, his face sheepish. "It was me, I bought it." "Julian, we can't afford not to. You needed to know your art has value, that you have value beyond their approval." I cried, but for the first time in years, they were tears of gratitude. I painted 5 more pieces that month. All of them sold. All to the same anonymous buyer who I knew was my husband, supporting me with money we didn't have because he believed in something I'd forgotten. Myself. While I built my small world of art and teaching, my cousins built their public personas on Aliner's wealth. Vanessa and Marcus dominated social media, their feeds a constant stream of luxury vacations, designer purchases, and charity galas. "So grateful for grandmother Aliner's generosity." Vanessa captioned a photo of herself in an evening gown at a museum fundraiser. "Family legacy means everything." Marcus posted from Europe, standing before the Louvre. Following in the Ashford tradition of culture and sophistication. Legacy family, I scrolled through their posts alone late at night, Julian asleep beside me. Each image was a reminder of the life I'd left behind, the inheritance I'd sacrificed. But something hardened inside me as I looked at their curated perfection. "You can keep her money," I whispered to the screen. "I'll build my own legacy." I closed the app and opened my sketchbook instead. Within 6 months, I had enough pieces for a small show. Petra arranged a Friday evening exhibit at her gallery, 20 pieces exploring themes of family, loss, and choice. I titled the collection Bloodlines. The opening was modest. Julian's family, my students and their parents, a few local art enthusiasts. But it was mine. 3 pieces sold that night. None to Julian, real buyers who saw value in my work. I stood in that small gallery, surrounded by people who appreciated me for what I created rather than what I'd been born into, and felt something shift. I was becoming someone new, someone I chose to be. Then Petra approached with news. "Aliner Ashford's health is declining." It's all over the society pages. I'd known this day would come, but I wasn't prepared for how much it would still hurt. Aliner's attorney called 6 weeks later. "Miss Westbrook, this is Howard Finch. Your grandmother has requested to see you." My heart raced as I drove to the estate, 5 years of silence potentially ending. Mrs. Chen let me in this time, her expression unreadable. Aliner sat in her conservatory, older and frailer than I remembered, but her eyes were still sharp, still assessing. "Grandmother." I approached slowly, unsure of my welcome. "You look older," she said, her tone making it sound like an accusation. Not "I've missed you" or "I'm glad you came." Just an observation about how I'd aged during our separation. I sat in the chair across from her, understanding slowly dawning. This wasn't reconciliation, it was evaluation. "You wanted to see me." I wanted to see if poverty taught you humility. The words were a slap. I'm not poor, grandmother. Julian and I are doing fine. Fine, she laughed, the sound bitter. You call teaching children to finger paint and living in a rented apartment fine? You could have had everything. I have everything that matters. Love, her voice dripped with contempt. Is that what you tell yourself to feel better about what you've lost? I stood, recognizing this meeting for what it was. Not an olive branch, but another test I couldn't pass. If that's all you wanted to say, sit down, Amara. I'm not finished with you. I sat because she was still my grandmother. Because some part of me still hoped for her approval, even knowing I'd never receive it. Alina produced a document from the table beside her chair. I want you to sign this, a simple formality acknowledging you won't contest my will when I'm gone. I read through the paper carefully. It wasn't simple at all. It was a legal declaration that I had no claim to the Ashford estate, the family business holdings, or Alina's personal assets, that I accepted my disinheritance willingly. You chose your husband over your family, Alina said. Now choose peace over greed. Sign this and we can part without legal complications. You think I'd fight for your money after everything? I think people become desperate. I'm ensuring you can't surprise me from the grave. I stood again, leaving the document unsigned on the table. I never wanted your money, grandmother. I wanted your love, your pride, your presence at my wedding. But you made those things conditional on marrying who you chose, not who I chose. Her face flushed with anger. You ungrateful. I'm grateful for the years we had before you made me choose between you and Julian, but I won't sign away my dignity to earn back your approval. I walked toward the door. Behind me, Alina's voice shook with rage. Then you'll get nothing, not even my respect. You'll watch your cousins inherit everything while you scramble for pennies with your schoolteacher husband. I paused at the threshold, looking back at her. I already have more than they ever will. I'm sorry you can't see that. I left her there, surrounded by her wealth and her bitterness, and I didn't look back. I sobbed in the car for 20 minutes before I could drive. Julian found me in our apartment parking lot, still gripping the steering wheel, my face blotchy and swollen. She hates me, I gasped. After everything, she really hates me. He pulled me from the car and held me in the cooling evening air. She doesn't define your worth, Amara. You do. Your art does. The lives you touch do. But his words couldn't penetrate the grief. I'd lost her again, this time with finality. There would be no reconciliation, no deathbed forgiveness, no movie moment where love conquered all. That night, I painted until sunrise. The canvas that emerged was dark and powerful. An elderly woman sitting alone in a mansion, surrounded by possessions and portraits, her shadow stretching across everything like a stain. I called it the matriarch's shadow. I didn't show it to Julian. Just left it to dry in our spare bedroom, this howl of pain and anger and loss captured in oil and canvas. A week later, Petra called. Amara, I submitted some of your work to a curator I know. He wants to feature you in a group exhibit at the Riverside Contemporary Gallery. When? 3 months, it's a significant venue. This could change everything for you. I stood in our small kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, and felt the world shift. Alina had tried to make me small, but I was becoming something she couldn't control or diminish, something entirely my own. The exhibit opened on a rainy Friday evening. The gallery was beautiful, its white walls and track lighting making my pieces look professional and important. The matriarch's shadow hung in the center of my collection, its darkness drawing people in. Strangers stood before my pain, studying it, discussing it, finding their own meaning in what I'd created. A critic from the city's arts journal approached me. You paint with unusual emotional honesty. There's truth in your pain that's rare in contemporary work. Thank you, I managed, uncomfortable with the attention. The artist bio says you studied privately. Who was your teacher? My grandmother. She taught me to see art as truth-telling when words fail. He nodded thoughtfully. Well, you're telling truths people need to hear. The review ran the following week. Amara Westbrook paints emotional rebellion with remarkable skill. Her work explores the cost of choosing authenticity over expectation, love over legacy. I never revealed I was Alina Ashford's disinherited granddaughter. My work stood on its own merit, and that mattered more than any family connection. But Alina's circle started whispering anyway. Small towns and old money created networks where information traveled fast. My aunt attended a gallery show 3 weeks later, not knowing I was the artist until she read my bio. I watched her face change from interest to shock to barely concealed rage. She left immediately, phone pressed to her ear. By evening, I knew exactly who she'd called. Alina called me the next morning. I almost didn't answer. "Congratulations," she said when I finally picked up, her voice dripping with ice. "I hear you've become quite the celebrated artist, a charity case with fans." "Grandmother, don't. I've heard enough about your emotional rebellion and your truth-telling. You're making our family look like villains in your little art show. I never mentioned the family, never used our name. You didn't have to. Everyone knows who you are, who I am. They're drawing their own conclusions about the subject matter." She paused, and I heard her breathing, labored and thin. "You want to paint me as the monster, fine. But remember who gave you those Sunday afternoons, who taught you everything you're exploiting now. It's not exploitation, it's healing. It's betrayal. But then you've always excelled at that." She hung up before I could respond. I stood in my classroom, phone in hand, students chattering around me as they prepared for the day's lesson. Mrs. Pearson, the center's director, approached with concern. "Everything okay?" "Family drama," I said, forcing a smile. "Nothing new." But that night I painted again, another piece for a collection that seemed to grow with each confrontation. This one I called The Last Call. It showed a telephone receiver hanging by its cord, disconnected but not quite abandoned. The symbolism wasn't subtle. But then, Aliner had never appreciated subtlety. 6 months later, Aliner's health crashed. The call came from Howard Finch, her attorney, not from family. "Your grandmother has been admitted to Whitmore Hospital. It's serious. You should come if you want to see her." I sat beside Julian on our couch, the phone on speaker between us. "Does she want to see me?" Silence. Then, carefully, "She hasn't said no," which wasn't the same as yes, but it was enough. I went alone, Julian understanding I needed to face this without support. Aliner lay in a private room, machines beeping quietly around her. She looked diminished, the fierce woman I'd known reduced to fragile mortality. My cousins had just left, I learned from a nurse. Of course they had. They'd been faithful, present, everything I hadn't been by choice and circumstance. I approached her bed slowly. Her eyes were closed, her breathing shallow. On the table beside her lay a ring, the Ashford family ring, emerald and gold, passed down through generations. It was supposed to be mine someday. "Grandmother," I whispered, "it's Amara." Her eyes flickered but didn't open. I stood there for 30 minutes, watching her breathe, memorizing her face. Finally, I picked up the ring and gently placed it back in her hand, closing her fingers around it. "I love you," I said quietly. "I always did. I'm sorry that wasn't enough." I walked out of that hospital room knowing I'd never see her alive again. The goodbye I'd been denied 5 years ago, I gave myself now. 3 days later, Aliner passed away in her sleep. The funeral was held at St. Bartholomew's Cathedral, a grand affair befitting Aliner's status. I wore black and sat in the back, Julian beside me for support this time. My family filled the front pews, a united front of grief and propriety. Vanessa dabbed her eyes with a silk handkerchief. Marcus gave a eulogy about Aliner's legacy and generosity. My aunt spoke about family values and tradition. No one mentioned me. After the service, as everyone filed past the casket, I waited until the crowd thinned. Then I approached, carrying a single white lily. My cousin Marcus stepped in front of me, his face twisted with contempt. "You have no right to be here," he hissed. "She cut you out for good reason. Show some dignity and leave." Vanessa appeared beside him. "You abandoned her when she needed family. Don't pretend to mourn now." I looked past them at Aliner's casket, at the woman who'd raised me and rejected me in equal measure. "She was my grandmother first," I said quietly, "before she was your benefactor." I stepped around them and laid the lily on the polished wood, leaned close and whispered, "Rest, grandmother. You don't have to be angry anymore." As I turned to leave, Howard Finch, the family attorney, approached. "Miss Westbrook, could you stay behind after the service? There are some legal matters to discuss." My cousins heard. Their expressions shifted from hostility to satisfaction. They assumed, as I did, that Aliner had one final insult prepared. One last way to formally exclude me from the family. We gathered in Aliner's estate library 3 days after the funeral. The entire family assembled, dressed in expensive black, their faces appropriately somber. Howard sat behind Aliner's massive desk, a folder before him containing her final wishes. "Aliner Ashford's last will and testament," he began, his voice formal and measured. He read through the usual preliminaries, then reached the distribution of assets. "To my granddaughter Vanessa, I leave my collection of jewelry and my villa in Tuscany." Vanessa smiled through practiced tears. "To my grandson Marcus, I leave my investment portfolio and my share in Ashford Industries." Marcus nodded solemnly, as if he'd expected nothing. Howard continued through various bequests to other relatives, the amount staggering. Then he reached my name. To my granddaughter, Amara Westbrook, who chose love over legacy. He paused. The room held its breath. I braced myself for the final rejection. You are hereby removed from my estate entirely. The words, expected but still painful, landed like stones. Gasps filled the room, not of shock but of satisfaction. My cousins exchanged triumphant glances. My aunt reached over to pat Vanessa's hand sympathetically, as if I were the villain finally getting justice. I stayed silent, staring at my hands folded in my lap. I'd known this was coming, had prepared myself for it, yet hearing it spoken aloud, made official and legal, still hollowed me out. Well, Marcus said into the silence. I think that concludes. Actually, Howard interrupted, his voice carrying a strange note. There is one more document. Howard pulled a sealed envelope from the folder, marked with Aliner's distinctive handwriting. This letter is marked private, to be read after my passing. It contains additional instructions regarding the family's art foundation. Everyone leaned forward. Aliner's art foundation was worth millions, housing a prestigious collection and funding scholarships and exhibitions. It was the crown jewel of the Ashford legacy. The letter states that in the event of her death, the foundation vault should be opened. The contents can only be accessed with a specific code. Howard looked up from the document, his eyes finding mine across the room. Only Amara has the access code. The room erupted. That's impossible, Vanessa shrieked. She hasn't been part of this family for years. Marcus stood, his face purple. This is clearly a mistake. My grandmother would never. It's dated 2 days before her death, Howard continued calmly. Witnessed and notarized, completely legal. My aunt turned to me, her voice shrill. What did you do? Did you manipulate her when she was dying? Force her to? I saw her once, I said quietly. Still processing this revelation. 6 months ago, for 15 minutes, she told me I'd get nothing. Howard stood. Nevertheless, the instructions are clear. Miss Westbrook, would you accompany me to the foundation vault? I rose on shaking legs, feeling 20 hostile eyes follow me from the room. Julian squeezed my hand before releasing it. This I had to do alone. What could Aliner have left in a vault that only I could access? The foundation's headquarters were housed in a converted mansion downtown, its galleries holding Aliner's carefully curated collection. Howard led me through halls I remembered from childhood visits, past paintings Aliner had taught me to appreciate during those Sunday afternoons. We reached the vault room, a secure space behind the main offices. Howard input a code, then stepped back. The final entry requires a password only you would know. Your grandmother left a clue. He handed me a note in Aliner's handwriting, where truth lives when words fail. I stared at the words, my mind racing. Then I understood. The painting. The one she'd shown me when I was 7, newly orphaned, trying to explain where my parents had gone. Art tells truth when people cannot, she'd said. I typed the password, canvas. The vault door opened with a soft click. Inside was a small room lined with filing cabinets and a desk. On the desk sat a stack of documents, a leather journal, and another sealed envelope. Howard and I reviewed the papers together, his professional composure cracking as he read. These are transfer papers, he said slowly, for the entire foundation, dated 2 days before her death. Everything, the building, the collection, the endowment, transferred to. He looked up at me, stunned. To you, the foundation is yours. I sank into the desk chair, my legs giving out. That's impossible. She told me I'd get nothing. She hated my choices. Apparently, Howard said quietly, she changed her mind. My hands shook as I opened the leather journal. Aliner's handwriting filled the pages, entries dating back 5 years. The first entry was dated the day after my wedding. I watched from the window today as Amara stood at my door with flowers. She looked so young, so hopeful. I turned away because I'm a coward. Because admitting I was wrong would mean admitting I drove her away from my own fear. I flipped through months of entries, each one a chronicle of regret. Marcus came by today, asking for money again. Vanessa called, wondering about her inheritance. Neither asked how I was feeling. Neither stayed longer than necessary. I think about Amara constantly. My vision blurred with tears. I went to see her art show today, disguised so she wouldn't know. The painting she called the matriarch's shadow, she painted me. My loneliness, my regret. She saw what I was too proud to admit. She sees everything I tried to hide. The final entry was written 3 days before she died. I was cruel because I feared losing her to a world I didn't understand. But I lost her anyway through my own cruelty. She built what I could not, a heart that doesn't need money to create beauty, a life rich in ways I never achieved despite my wealth. The sealed envelope contained a letter addressed to me. I opened it with trembling fingers, Eleanor's final words emerging through my tears as I read aloud to Howard. Amara, if you're reading this, I'm gone and it's too late for me to say these words to your face. I was wrong. About Julian, about your choices, about what matters in life. I continued reading through tears. I watched you build a life from nothing after I took everything from you. I saw your art, your teaching, the way you turned pain into beauty instead of bitterness. You became everything I wanted to be but was too afraid to become, someone who chose love over fear. The foundation was always meant for you. You're the only one who understood what it was really about. Not prestige or social standing, but preserving truth and beauty for future generations. I'm giving you what I should have given you from the beginning, trust in your judgment and your vision. I'm sorry I made you choose. I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to choose you. Build something beautiful from this. Make it matter in ways I never could. The letter was signed simply Eleanor with a postscript. P.S. I bought all of Julian's anonymous purchases of your art. He was trying to support you, but I wanted to keep your paintings close. They helped me remember what really mattered. I burst into tears then, great heaving sobs that shook my entire body. Howard tactfully excused himself, leaving me alone in the vault with Eleanor's final gift and her final apology. The grandmother who'd rejected me had never stopped watching, never stopped loving, just been too proud to admit her mistake until death forced her hand. She'd given me everything, not the money or the villa or the investment portfolios. She'd given me validation, acknowledgement, and the one thing I'd needed most, her recognition that I'd been right to choose love. When I finally composed myself enough to return to the library, I found my family exactly where I'd left them, their expressions ranging from confusion to barely contained rage. The moment I entered, the questions started flying. What was in the vault? What did she leave you? There must be some mistake. I stood at the front of the room, Howard beside me with the transfer documents. My family fell silent, sensing something had fundamentally changed. Eleanor left me the art foundation, I said quietly. The building, the collection, the endowment, all of it. The explosion was immediate. Vanessa lunged to her feet. You manipulated her. You convinced her somehow when she was sick and vulnerable. Marcus pounded the desk. This is fraud. We'll contest it. Get lawyers. You don't deserve any of this. My aunt's voice was shrill. You abandoned your family, walked away when you were needed. Howard raised his hand. The documents are ironclad, witnessed, notarized, filed with the proper authorities 2 days before Mrs. Ashford's death. Any contest will fail. She was our grandmother, too, Vanessa shrieked. We were there, we visited. We didn't abandon her for some poor teacher. I looked at them, at their rage and entitlement, and felt something settle inside me. Peace, maybe, or just exhaustion with their constant bitterness. You're right, I said calmly. You visited, you stayed faithful to the inheritance, not to her. I stayed faithful to love, even when it cost me everything. Love, Marcus scoffed. You chose a nobody over your family. I chose a person over possessions, and Eleanor finally understood the difference. I picked up Eleanor's letter from where Howard held it. She left me this foundation not because I deserved it more, but because I understood what it was really for. Not status, not prestige. Creating beauty and supporting artists who might not otherwise have a voice. I don't want your houses, I continued, looking at each of them. Your cars or jewelry or European villas. Keep them, enjoy them. I just want to make something good from all of this. Vanessa's laugh was bitter. Playing the saint now, how convenient when you've already won. I didn't win anything, I replied quietly. I lost my grandmother twice, once when she cut me off and again when she died before we could reconcile. You can't win when the price is that high. My aunt stood, gathering her purse with sharp, angry movements. We're contesting this. You'll see us in court. Howard's voice was firm. You're welcome to try, but I assure you, Eleanor was quite thorough. She anticipated opposition and ensured every legal avenue was closed. They filed out one by one, muttering threats and accusations. Only Julian remained, standing quietly in the corner where he'd waited throughout this entire ordeal. When the last relative slammed the door behind them, he crossed the room and pulled me into his arms. Are you okay? He whispered. I nodded against his chest. I think so, it's just so much. What are you going to do? I pulled back, looking at the documents spread across Eleanor's desk. Exactly what she wanted, make the foundation matter. Open it to artists from all backgrounds, not just the wealthy ones. Create the space she and I used to dream about during those Sunday afternoons. That sounds perfect. I smiled, really smiled, for the first time since Aliner's death. And I'm going to paint again, really paint, everything I've been holding back. The foundation, I realized, wasn't just Aliner's legacy anymore. It was mine to build. Word spread quickly through our city's art community and society circles. The headlines wrote themselves. Disinherited granddaughter becomes sole heir to Ashford cultural legacy. Local news outlets requested interviews. Arts journals wanted my story. Aliner's final act had turned me from outcast to headline news. My family's attempts to contest the will were dismissed quickly. Howard had done his job too well, and Aliner had been too thorough. Within weeks, the legal challenges evaporated, leaving my cousins to nurse their wounded pride and diminished inheritances. The foundation's board requested a meeting to discuss transition plans. I spent a week preparing, working with Howard to understand the full scope of what Aliner had left me. The endowment alone was worth $12 million. The building and collection added millions more. I could have sold it all, taken the money, and lived comfortably for the rest of my life. Instead, I scheduled a press conference for 3 weeks after Aliner's funeral. I stood at the podium in the foundation's main gallery, cameras pointed at me, journalists with notebooks ready. Julian stood in the back, giving me an encouraging smile. "Thank you for coming," I began, my voice steadier than I felt. "I want to talk today about legacy and what it really means." I spoke for 15 minutes about Aliner's vision for art as truth-telling, about her passion for preserving beauty and supporting emerging artists, about the lessons she'd taught me during Sunday afternoons in her gallery. "My grandmother taught me that value isn't inherited. It's created through passion, dedication, and the courage to build something meaningful," I continued. "She taught me that art matters not because it's expensive, but because it tells truths words cannot express." I paused, looking out at the assembled reporters and community members. In the back row, I spotted Vanessa and Marcus, their faces tight with resentment. Good. Let them hear this. "Under my leadership, the Ashford Foundation will expand its mission. We'll provide scholarships to artists from all economic backgrounds. We'll offer gallery space to emerging voices who might not otherwise be heard. We'll prove that art isn't just for the wealthy, it belongs to everyone." The questions came fast after that. About my estrangement from Aliner, about the contested will, about my own artwork. I answered honestly, holding nothing back about the pain of rejection or the unexpected redemption. "My grandmother made a mistake cutting me off," I said to one journalist. "But she corrected it. That's what matters." Not the inheritance itself, but her recognition that love and legacy aren't opposites. They're the same thing built in different ways. After the conference, the foundation's curator approached me with a proposal. "We'd like to feature your work in our next major exhibition. Your piece is about family, belonging, and choice." I hesitated. Then I thought about Aliner reading about my emotional rebellion in the Arts Journal, about her going to my shows in disguise, about her keeping my paintings close. "Yes," I said, "but on one condition. I want to include Aliner's portrait, the one Vanessa donated to that auction years ago." "We can arrange that." 2 months later, the exhibition opened. My paintings hung throughout the gallery, including the matriarch's shadow and several new pieces I'd created after Aliner's death. And in the center of the main gallery, Aliner's portrait presided over everything, but I'd repainted it. Not the original work, but my version. My grandmother, as I remembered her from those Sunday afternoons, not imperial and distant, but warm and engaged, teaching a 7-year-old orphan to see beauty in brushstrokes. The new painting was titled The Masterpiece She Created. Because that's what I was, I realized. Not her disappointment or her failure. Her masterpiece. The girl she'd raised to see truth in art, to value beauty over wealth, to choose love even when it cost everything. My family attended the opening. They stood before my paintings in silence, seeing their own rejection reflected back at them in oil and canvas. Vanessa paused in front of the Aliner portrait, her face unreadable. "It's not how she really was," she said. "It's how she was with me," I replied. "Before everything broke, this is what I choose to remember." Marcus studied the matriarch's shadow, the dark piece I'd painted after our last confrontation. "You made her look cruel." "I painted my truth. That's what she taught me to do." They left without congratulating me, without acknowledging the work. I hadn't expected them to. Some rifts don't heal. Some families don't reconcile. That's okay. Sometimes walking away is the bravest choice you can make. 3 years later, I stood in the Foundation's main gallery watching children from the summer art program display their work. The space had transformed under my leadership, becoming exactly what Alina and I had dreamed about during those Sunday afternoons, a place where art thrived because of passion, not pedigree. Julian appeared beside me, slipping his hand into mine. Our son, just 6 months old, slept peacefully in the carrier against his chest. We'd named him after no one, giving him a name that belonged only to him, Noah, starting fresh. "You've built something amazing here," Julian said, looking around at the children's artwork covering the walls. Bright, honest, unafraid. "We built it," I corrected. "You supported every crazy idea, every late night, every moment I doubted myself." He kissed my temple. "That's what partners do." I walked through the gallery, Noah's soft breathing a reminder of what really mattered. Past the children's work, past the established artists we now featured, past the scholarship winners whose pieces hung with pride in our halls. At the far end, in a small alcove, hung Alina's letter. I'd had it framed and displayed with her permission, given posthumously through Howard. Visitors could read her final words to me, her acknowledgement of mistakes and her belief in second chances. Beside the letter hung the last painting I'd done of her. Not the warm teaching grandmother from the portrait, but something new. Alina and me standing side by side in a gallery looking at a canvas together. Neither of us facing the viewer, just absorbed in art and beauty in the language we'd always shared. I titled it Where Truth Lives. Julian found me there, tears streaming down my face as I reread Alina's words for the 1,000th time. "Still hits hard?" he asked gently. "Always, but it doesn't hurt anymore. It just reminds me." Of what? I looked around the Foundation, at everything we'd built, from Alina's regret and my refusal to become bitter, at the children discovering their voices, at the emerging artists finding their audience, at the legacy that had almost died with Alina's anger but instead grew into something neither of us could have imagined. "That love was never beneath us," I whispered, touching Alina's framed letter gently. "It was the masterpiece all along."